Welcome back to the Quick Focus Blueprint program. And in this lesson, I'm going to give you a productivity hack, a technique that's going to go a long way for you. And we're going to be building on this idea of the science of momentum and how to really start your day. And to begin with, I'm going to give you a quote from one of my favorite authors, Ernest Hemingway. And some of you may know he woke up every morning and he began writing right away. And he has been quoted as saying, "When I'm working on a book, I write every morning as soon as first light as possible. There is no one to disturb you, and it is cool or cold, and you come to your work and warm as you write." And so there's been lots of talk about routines and morning routines and by various people. And you can find them online. Everyone from Tony Robbins to Steve Jobs to Oprah Winfrey. We've talked about my morning routine on how I jumpstart my brain every single morning. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is I love this technique because it's so simple, right? Because you don't have to go and elaborate on this and really draw it out because it's really straightforward. And the idea here is really to do the hardest thing on your list first, if you will. And what I'm thinking about is not just the hardest thing. What I really want to be able to hone in on is to do the most important thing first each day. And this may determine around your chronotype. And we talked about the power of your chronotype. And some people are morning people and some people are night owls, right? You have your early bird, you have your night owls. But I would experiment with this, and we're basically saying to give yourself some time and give yourself some space to work on what's most important to you every single day. And so that's what Ernest Hemingway would do. And so I would start there. And it tends to work because willpower in general tends to be higher earlier in the day. And that means you're able to provide your highest level of vitality, your highest level of energy and effort to your most important task. And so a big part of determining your priorities is finding out the thing that's most important. Also is the deeper you get into your day, the more likely you're going to come across distractions, right? And you know this because you have unexpected people coming in and ideas and requests for you that really get into your schedule, and it's harder to be able to keep that out. And so start with the most important thing, the first thing you do each morning, and that will help you. And also, we talked about the power of the Zeigarnik effect. The Zeigarnik effect, where the psychologist in Europe noticed that waiters and waitresses would remember the order until the order was delivered. Once the server delivered the order to the customer, they would forget it. And the Zeigarnik effect is basically saying the brain, the human mind, doesn't enjoy open loops, and it tends to obsess about something until it is done. And so unfinished projects, your mind doesn't like unfinished projects. They create an unresolved tension. They create an anxiety, maybe an internal stress. And when we start on something, we want to finish it. And you're more likely to finish it after you start it, especially if you want to start it as soon as possible. So that is the tip. Now, I'm going to go from there into a little bit more because I know some of you have already tried this, right? And so how do you prioritize work when everything is number one? And you can't. That's the equivalent of some people, they go through a book and they highlight everything. And that's not the goal. If you are that kind of person that goes through a book and you have a highlighter and you highlight everything and your book glows in the dark, if everything becomes important, then nothing becomes important. If you make everything important, then nothing is important. And so how do you prioritize your work so you could focus on the one thing? Because if everything is number one, nothing is number one. And so all projects that you have, especially the really big ones, the more complex projects, the larger projects, you need to create clear priorities. Easier said than done, obviously. But still, knowing how to prioritize your tasks for your personal life, for your work, it really affects the success of your day, your week, your month, and so on. And then you could also apply this towards your team. I know many of you have started businesses and you have teams. How do you get your team to prioritize and really focus on what's most important? And so going back to this idea, we talk about Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. One of the habits of highly effective people, which I would say also are habits of highly focused people, is to make first things first. Make first things first. In fact, that's the name of one of his other books. It was such an important habit, he actually created a whole book called First Things First, because one of the biggest challenges for people is accurately prioritizing the work that matters on a daily basis. You know, you could have some of the best software out there and you have a great team, but you don't want to fall into the role of crying, everything is a top priority. This is top priority, and this is a top priority, and this is a top priority. So the idea behind this is here are a few tips that you could use to help you to prioritize and find out what's most important so you could focus on that. Now, first thing I would do is as you're prioritizing, and that's what we're talking about. And again, it's so interesting because the word priority literally only became more like plural just a few decades ago. Before there was no such thing as priorities. There was only one priority. It was what was number one, right? But nowadays we're trying to juggle so many things and we're making everything important. So here are a few tips on how to prioritize so you could better focus. I would say number one is to collect a list of all the things you need to do. Collect a list of all the tasks. And this is your to-do list, right? Pull together everything that you could possibly get done in that day. And don't worry about the order or the sequence or the number of them. Just empty your mind and start with a brain dump, if you will. I mentioned Bruce Lee a lot because he was a mentor. I didn't know him, but I study his work very much, and always talking about be like water, and water is still. And if you throw a pebble into water, it ripples, but it ripples and it gives the exact response. It doesn't over respond and it doesn't under respond, but it helps to get everything out of your mind so that way you could have a clear mind. And so list everything, get it out of your mind, and make a list of your tasks, the things you need to do. That's your to-do list. The second thing you do is this is where you go through and you look at and you identify what's important and what's urgent. And this is right out of Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. They have the quadrants, and you have what's urgent and important. You have what's not urgent but important. You have what's urgent and unimportant. And you have what's not urgent and not important. And you're like, why would you ever do those things? And so the idea here is not to spend time on things, number one, that's not important, right? Whether it's urgent and unimportant or not urgent and unimportant, the idea here, it's unimportant. So you don't want to spend a lot of time in those quadrants. Where you do want to spend time with is in the area of urgent and important. So that's very important. That's where you have a demand on you and it's important. So you have to take care of that. And so you do those things. And then the other thing is you focus on what's not urgent but important, because the more time you could spend on things that are not urgent and important, the better you're going to be, because if you don't take care of those things, then those things become more urgent and important. And so you want to identify, the second thing is identify what's urgent and identify what's important. Some things are both and some things are neither. And so what you want to do is, now that you have this task, go through your task list and check to see if there are any high priority things that you need to take care of, things that are urgent and important and things that are important. And remember, going back to the very first tip we talked about, before we started this list, is to really focus and do the most important thing first. From there, what you do is you want to be able to assess value. And what I mean by that, if you look at all the important work that you have, maybe you're circling it, maybe you're putting a star, maybe you're highlighting it, what you want to do is prioritize that. Prioritize the highest value. So you want to add or assess the values so you know which ones you should focus on first. And the things that are most important, I would suggest, are the things that you want to put there. And so what you're doing, basically, you're assessing value and you're also putting them in order. And I would order it based on the estimated effort. There's not right or wrong on this. It's a really self-awareness, understanding how you best produce, how you best focus. Some people like to start with things that have a little bit less effort and build some momentum throughout the day. Other people like to tackle something that has a high level of effort because that's where they have the most energy. Because what I would finish with this is being flexible, because you want to be flexible while you're doing this, because things change. There are things that you can't predict. Nobody could predict. And the idea change is the only constant that there is. And so once you know your priorities, understand that they might change depending on different life conditions, different business cycles, depending on what's going on with your family or the people that are vested in that task itself or that project. And I would also say be so flexible that you could also say no, that you know when to say no, and you know to cut something out of this. Because the idea here is you'll most likely never be able to get through your entire to-do list. But after you prioritize everything and you look at what you value in each of the different tasks, and then you look at the ones that are going to take the most energy, some of the things might not be worth your attention or effort. And so all you have to do is just cut those off of the list, because the more freedom you have, the more energy you're going to have to be able to focus on the things that are most important again. And so this is what we're talking about here in this lesson, is understand how to prioritize, because I don't think you could prioritize your time, but I do believe you could prioritize your tasks. You can't maybe prioritize or manage your time, but you can manage your priorities, if you will. And so that's really what this lesson is all about. So what I want you to do is, in the comment section, is what's the most important thing for you right now? If you're willing to share, or the first thing that you're willing to share, that you're really willing to share, is what's the most important thing that you could be doing starting tomorrow morning, or even this morning. What's the most important thing? Put it there so you could focus on it, because once you're public about it, it forces you to be focused. And so we could root you on and we could cheer you on. And I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's lesson.